There are different ways to split a log. Here we want to give a brief demonstration of squaring or blocking a log, of quartering and of sawing through. We'll also show a method seldom used in Sweden, but rather common in Canada. When you decide how to saw up a log, you start at the top or thinner end. Blocking or squaring means creating a beam-like element from which to saw planks. First you decide how wide the element is to be. After that, you set the log supports so that there is space for a board on either side, not counting the bark slab. The log support at the bottom end is set somewhat lower, so that the plank element ends up in the middle of the log. Once the first slab is removed, the rest of the sawing can use the sawmill's own dimension scale. Raise the log for the desired plank width, say 5/4 inch steps, 4 for the first non-edge board and 1 for the kerf. Then turn the log and set the desired board width, say 6 inches plus the thickness of the sideboard plus the kerf, or 7 1/4 inches. The slab and the sideboard are sawn and the element is raised. The usual method now is to make the first cut parallel to the log centre line, meaning that the log support at the log root end is set lower than at the top end. The slab is removed, after which the log is raised the same number of steps each time. Since the log supports are cranked separately, the log rises as much at both ends, even though the supports are at different heights. Once you've passed the pith, it's time to turn the element again. A new decision is made on board size, but now both log supports are set at the same height. For example, one 2-inch plank and a 1-inch board are going to be cut. The log supports are then set for 2 + 1 + 1/4 inch for the kerf, or 3 1/4 inches. For handicrafts and carpentry pieces, a very simple method is often used. One simply cuts all the way through. Even in this method, the first cut is made parallel to the centre line. Then you simply cut the log into boards or planks. As when you make a block, it's best to turn the log once the pith is passed. A not unusual method for cutting boards for construction is to leave the bark on until after the boards have been dried. Then the wane edges are removed. This results in completely straight boards, useful for such purposes as for floor battens or even for ordinary construction pieces. There is no problem with sawing short pieces of rare handicraft wood. You only need to supplement the sawmill with a wide plank and an adjustable log support. Then you can split the most valuable craftswood you can imagine, such as pieces of fruit trees. This is a piece of mountain ash. Buying that kind of wood is rather difficult. Handcrafters and smaller professional cabinet makers can both increase the value of their products dramatically by using woods that are more or less impossible to use in industrial production. The truly choosy carpenter wants quilted boards. This method supplies boards with standing annual rings. The Logosol sawmill is perfect for quartering logs. Make the first cut through the pith. But don't saw all the way through the log, stop an inch or so from the log end. Now turn the log 90 degrees and make the next cut through the pith. This time cut all the way and then force the quarters apart. Then saw alternating sides of the quarters. Using quilted boards is yet another example of how small-scale wood preparation can make use of raw materials the large-scale industry cannot touch. Because the log can be placed in a number of different ways, it's possible to make many types of special cuts with a Logosol sawmill. One example is the ease with which you can saw wedges or conical beams. One sawing method which is hardly ever seen in Sweden is rather common in Canada. Here you cut parallel to the log's surface. In this way you avoid both the pith and the wood nearest to it, both of poorer quality. Some of the waste is a wedge of pith instead of ending up in larger bark slabs. When you saw your own wood, you can often get a rather high yield. To begin with, the log length can be adapted to what you need when you're still in the woods. Then you can cut to exactly the dimensions and qualities you need. People who begin to saw themselves are almost always happily surprised by the high quality gained from their own logs. Much of what you can saw yourself is of a higher quality than nearly anything you can find at the woodlots. The sawmills sell the highest quality wood to the furniture and interior decoration industries. What is then sold to woodlot consumers is mainly fifths and sixths, the latter so-called building quality. Unsorted lots of the higher qualities are very expensive if they can be found at all. Sales of these highest ratings can provide an interesting extra income to the home sawyer whose main need is building materials.